Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and it's the 29th of January 2024. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So amongst all the chatter over the last week or so around client diversity on Ethereum, another topic has come up that I think has been, I wouldn't call it divisive, but has brought forward a lot of strong opinions on the topic. And this is something that I actually wanted to focus on because I think it's pretty important. Now, this topic is solo staking or home staking or just staking generally, and basically discussing everything that falls into that. And now I'm going to use Superfizz's tweet here as a springboard, where he said, this he's got a screenshot that he shared on Twitter where he said, "This comment is hella right." And basically the comment was someone saying, "I don't hear many large audience podcasts talk about solo staking. I see them promoting projects that almost directly incentivizes the use of LSTs. I think I am the right combination of profiles to be a solo staker, and yet I'm considering quitting. Who else is going to do it?" And then Superfizz continues with his caption of this screenshot saying, "I hear maybe Sassel, obviously me, promoting solo staking, but no one else comes to mind. It's because they can't profit from you unless you buy what they're shilling. Podcasts don't exist to serve you, they exist to profit from your ears." So I'm not going to comment on the podcast thing there. I'm definitely just going to stick to commenting on the staking topic here. So I wanted to kick off this discussion by basically describing the role of a node operator within Ethereum, right? So, they're obviously referred to as, stakers, people who run full nodes, solo stakers, home stakers, whatever you want to call them. But essentially, anyone who runs a full node or a full node and validator combo is considered a node operator. Now, for the purpose of this discussion, we're obviously going to focus on the people who run a full node as well as one or more validators, because they are definitely they're the most important role in the network, and they are what we call, as I said, node operators. Now, there are many different ways to be a node operator on the network. If you want to go from basically the, least accessible way to the most accessible way, the least accessible way to be a node operator, that is someone who runs a full node and a validator, is to be a true solo staker. Now, the reason why I say this is the least accessible way is because you have that massive upfront capital cost of 32 ETH. Now, this is something that I don't know why the community likes to ignore, but they do on net. I see a lot of people ignoring this, but essentially the biggest barrier to entry to being a true solo staker, when I say true solo staker, I mean someone who brings the 32 ETH, does all the node operation themselves, isn't using any third-party tools like Rocket Pool, for example, is just using staking in its purest form and doing it all on their own. And that's that big, and the biggest barrier to entry is that 32 ETH requirement. As I've discussed before, 99.99% of the planet will never do that. Will never be able to bring the 32 ETH to the and stake it as a solo staker. Now, in light of that, people ask, okay, well, why don't we reduce the minimum ETH required? Why don't we reduce it from 32 ETH to like 16 ETH and 8 ETH and so on and so forth? We have done that through third-party tools, like Rocket Pool, for example, has lowered that to 8 ETH, and then there's 2.4 ETH worth of RPL collateral, and then also you have squad staking via DVT. That's currently a minimum of 3.2 ETH, and that is different to Rocket Pool in that with DVT, you're all running the same instance of the validator as a squad. Like if you have 10 people in your squad, you put 3.2 ETH each in, you're all running the same instance of that validator, and you're also running, a full node locally as well. So you are technically a node operator. But both of those things and any other things that fall off of that, or any other projects that tackle that, are not solo staking. You're not true solo staking because you're using other tools, right? You're not just doing it purely using the tools of the Ethereum network. You're using tools that have been built around it. Nothing wrong with that, but if we're talking in the context of true solo staking, number one barrier to entry is still that capital requirement. Now, of course, if we lower it to 16 ETH, it would be half of the cost it is now in US dollars, but that would still be inaccessible to most of the planet. And then if the price of ETH doubles, and obviously we expect the price of ETH to go up, right? When the price of ETH doubles, that means that we're back to square one. Okay, well, let's reduce it down to 8 ETH. I'm like, okay, fine. But again, even at current prices, most people are priced out of that. Like, let's put some hard numbers on it, guys. 8 ETH at even just $2,000 ETH, that's $16,000. 16,000 US dollars. How many people do you think have 16,000 US dollars lying around to, one, want to speculate on ETH? Because when you buy ETH and hold it, you're speculating on it, right? And two, become a solo staker with that, right? Even if you drop it down to 4 ETH, the pool of those people is very, very small. And then after you discuss the capital requirement, and after we talk about that, because as I said, that is the biggest barrier to entry, then you can talk about the technical aspect to it. But first and foremost, the biggest barrier to entry to true solo staking is always the capital requirement. And yes, I talk a lot about solo staking on the refuel and about how you should do it if you are able, but that if you are able that I use means that if you have the 32 ETH, right, or if you have the means to acquire 32 ETH and you're comfortable with speculating on ETH, and then you're comfortable learning how to do the technical side of it. Now, of course, there are easier ways to solo stake. You don't have to just use the command line. You can use GUIs like DAppNode, for example. But again, doesn't matter how easy we make solo staking. Doesn't matter if it was literally one click and you don't have to worry about anything else. You still need to bring that 32 ETH, and that is still the biggest barrier to entry here. So that, I think, is the preface, and that is the baseline of where we should start from. Now we can move on to discussing the other options that I talked about versus something like Rocket Pool. Now, when you spin up when you become a Rocket Pool node operator, you not only have to bring the 8 ETH, but you also have to bring the RPL collateral and then keep yourself above a minimum collateral threshold in order to claim rewards. So that, again, it lowers the barrier for entry, but then it has its own barriers that come into it. It has its own things that people may not want to do, such as speculating on the RPL token. Now, I know in the future there are plans to remove or possibly remove that requirement so that it's just pure ETH, but that again just introduces other kind of barriers there, even though it's lowered the capital requirement one there. And Rocket Pool's great. I believe that the Rocket Pool node, the software that Rocket Pool uses, the smart node stack, is really great. It's easier than pure solo staking via command line. You've got a nice little user interface there. Obviously, I've been a Rocket Pool node operator for a while now. It's really great. So no, obviously, shade there. But if we're discussing kind of the barriers to entry here to becoming I guess like home staker, because I mentioned before how I believe that a true solo staker is someone who just doesn't use any of these third-party tools and just does it on their own completely. But if we're talking about like a node operator or a home node operator or home staker, then Rocket Pool falls into that. People using DVT for squad staking fall into that. Any of these other future services that are coming online fall into that. Now, some of these services will have LSTs that go to the node operator. With Rocket Pool, it's different. Where with Rocket Pool, there is no LST. You don't get RETH as a node operator. You basically are providing the validators are providing the node operating services for RETH to exist, and that goes to people who deposit ETH into the deposit pool that matches with the ETH that you bring as a node operator. It sounds more complex than it is, but essentially you don't get that LST when you put your ETH up to be a node operator there. Same is true for squad staking with Obel, for example, with DVT. There is no LST. You're basically spinning up what I would consider a true solo staker node, but using Obel software in order to split the cost up to 10 ways, 3.2 ETH each, right? Which obviously, as I said, lowers the barrier to entry, but still that's not what I would consider true solo staking. It's still home staking, but it's not true solo staking because you are sharing the load there. But I do think it is the gold standard because it means that everyone's running the validators and the full node. So I think that's really cool. I think that's a really great way to increase the number of node operators on the network, because I don't think I mentioned this before, but the most important metric for Ethereum's decentralization is the number of node operators on the network. And it's not just about the number of node operators that are also that are running both full nodes and validators. It's also about people who are running full nodes. And people discuss, okay, well, if the capital requirement is so high to be a solo staker, why are the hardware requirements so low? Because the hardware requirements aren't just low for validators, or it's also low for people who just want to run a full node, because you don't get any rewards for running a full node. Running a full node is an altruistic endeavor. There are really two reasons. Well, there's a few reasons why you run a full node, but two main reasons I would say. The first reason is obviously to verify the chain for yourself, right? And verify everything's fine for yourself. And then you can use it as like your own RPC and things like that. And you get better guarantees, censorship resistance and all that. You basically get the full power of the Ethereum network in your hand. But then there's the other reason, which is basically just wanting to be an altruist and wanting to increase the number of full nodes that are live on the Ethereum network and increase Ethereum's decentralization across the board. But those are really the two main reasons. You're not getting rewarded for it. But if you attach validators to it, you of course are getting rewarded for it. And as I explained, there are multiple different ways to do this. So overall, I guess my point here is that there are multiple different ways to be a home staker, whether that's true solo staking, whether that's a Rocket Pool node operator using DVT, and whether they include LSTs or not. They go to other people or go to you. I think that it's just much more multifaceted than saying that everyone should solo stake, right? And everyone should the gold standard is solo staking. It is, but also that comes with a high barrier to entry. And the last thing I'll talk about on this topic is the topic of profitability. Now, let's do a hypothetical scenario where solo staking, true solo staking, I should say, it has only a minimum of 1 ETH, right? You don't have to bring 1 ETH to stake on the network. Let's just say ETH is $2,000 just for argument's sake here. So that's a $2,000 entry fee. Now throw in the hardware cost, which is relatively cheap. I think you could get away with $400 to $500 US dollars. It depends on where you are in the world, but let's just say a nice kind of like $500. It's probably less than that, but just to round it off. So that's a $2,500 initial capital investment to get started here. Okay, so what's the return on ETH right now in terms of the APR? It's around 4%. It could go up in the bull market when MEV kind of picks up and stuff like that. But on average, over the year, it's been about 4%, right? So 4% of $2,000, because you're not getting 4% on the hardware cost. You're only getting it on the ETH, right? 4% of $2,000, I believe, head math is $80. So you're earning $80 a year for an initial capital investment of $2,500. Now, let's assume that ETH is just going sideways for that period. You're not even close to covering the hardware cost. Like, I'm not talking about the ETH cost, because the hardware cost is an actual cost. The ETH cost is not the ETH can obviously be sold at a later date for less than you bought it for or more than you bought it for. But with hardware, it's pretty much always going to be sold for less than you bought it for. There is no way that someone is going to buy that hardware off you for more than you bought it for, especially after it's been in use. That's just not the way, computer parts work, right? They're always going to go, it's like it's like a car. As soon as you buy a brand new car and you drive it off the lot, it's already worth less than what you bought it for. So same kind of thing applies here. So how many people would realistically go through all of the hassle, not just the hassle of technical hassle, but putting together the hardware, making sure that they've got the internet that can, I'm not even talking about internet costs, by the way, making sure they've got the internet that is reliable, making sure they've got the right internet plan, making sure they've got electricity, all that stuff there for $80 a year. How many people do you think are going to do that versus the person that has 1 ETH just going with an LST, just buying an LST, just going with something like Coinbase? So we have to be realistic here about the pool of people that are actually going to become home stakers. And home stakers, of course, are the gold standard. They bat way above their average. Right, because I used an example in the Daily Gwei Discord channel the other day where I said that think about Coinbase as a staker on the network, or as a node operator on the network. They're one node operator on the network. As an entity, they are one. They have 15% of the validators, which is 130,000 validators or something like that, right? So, but they're still one node operator. Now, solo stakers or home stakers account for, I think the last estimates I saw was about 6% of the network, and this includes Rocket Pool node operators. So when we do that, and then we look at the amount of unique node operators, it's in the thousands. So you have one node operator with 15% share, but then you have thousands of node operators with only 6% share. In my mind, the 6% share has way more power than the 15% because there are way more voices and there are way more node operators. So they have way more power in Ethereum and they have way more weight in Ethereum, even though they're a less percentage of the network, right? And same goes for something like Lido. Obviously, they have like 38 node operators, but same thing. Compared to thousands, very different here. So you have to look at it from that perspective in terms of if you want to look at decentralization. But going back to what I was saying about the kind of incentives here, the reality is that like you're going to want to get a decent return on your kind of investment here. And $80 a year is not enough to cover the hardware. So even if you expect ETH not to go up very much when you buy it, right, you're still not earning anywhere near enough to cover the hardware cost. And, to get to break even would take quite a while from there. It'd take 5 years to get to break even, or more than that, 6 years or more, depending on what you got the hardware for here. So when we take all that and we be realistic about it, there is a floor of ETH at the end of the day. There is a certain number of ETH that will be minimally required in order to make solo staking, like true solo staking, worth it. And it's way higher than 1 ETH, guys. Like, you can do the math on this. You can assume different ETH prices. You can assume different APRs, but it is always going to be pretty high. And that's just the nature of things. And because that's the nature of things, because we understand that's the nature of things, these LST projects have spun up and these other staking services have spun up to meet the market where it is, basically. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Nothing wrong with it at all, and I encourage the community to be mindful about this when talking about solo staking or true solo staking versus home staking generally versus staking with a service provider. Because as I said, the capital requirement is always the number one thing, and the expected return on capital. The technical stuff is secondary, in my opinion, because the technical stuff, I mean, if you don't even have the 32 ETH to put up in the first place, then the technical stuff is completely irrelevant to you. You're not even going to go through those hoops because you don't have the ETH that's required here. But if you do, right, for true solo staking, then you're more likely to go through the hoops here, in my opinion. And then last thing I'll say on the profitability topic is that people will argue that, okay, well, as a solo staker, my profitability may be around the same as an LST, but I'm not getting the added benefits of like potential airdrops and things like that. And to that, I just say that, well, at the end of the day, that is not part of the Ethereum protocol design. If the Ethereum protocol can't know when people are going to get airdrops or not, it can't really design around that. It's really up to the projects, and it's up to you guys to encourage the projects to airdrop more to solo stakers or airdrop more to home stakers generally. That includes rocket pool node operators, to encourage more of that. But at the end of the day, in terms of percentage of the overall network, home stakers or solo stakers are always going to be the minority in terms of percentage. But because they represent thousands of node operators, they have much more weight in governance discussions, much more weight in the Ethereum community than, and they're much more engaged than even the biggest providers. Like Coinbase, for example, is pretty engaged in the Ethereum community, but they're engaged in different ways, right? Like they're very engaged with the layer 2 stuff, with the scaling stuff, but they're not so much engaged in kind of core protocol work around censorship resistance, around MEV PBS stuff, right? Around solo staking and making that or making that better, making that more efficient, making that I guess like better in terms of the issuance curve of ETH. Like they're not involved in those discussions. Whereas a lot of people in the Ethereum community who are solo stakers or rocket pool node operators or what have you, they are very involved. So they have more say, they have more weight, they have more merit in the ecosystem. So it's good to keep that in mind there. But anyway, I spent like the majority of this episode talking about that because I did mention here in a reply to Superfears that I had a lot of thoughts on this topic, and obviously I just went through them all. So hopefully you enjoyed that, but there is a bunch of other stuff to get through today, and continue the conversation with me if you guys want in the Daily Gwei Discord channel. I mean, you can comment on YouTube as well, but it's much easier to reply on the Discord channel, so continue the discussion there, and let me know if you agree or disagree with me. I think my thinkings around this is pretty sound. It's something that I've thought about a lot because I am a true solo staker. I am a rocket pool node operator. I am very heavily involved with a lot of these LST protocols as an advisor or an investor. So I pretty much have my hand in every pie here. But it does, like for me, I'm not trying to be biased to any one solution. I'm just trying to give the facts, and then people can make their own decisions about what they want to do here. So as I said, gold standard is true solo staking. Gold standard is home staking. But you have to be realistic about the total pool of people that are actually going to be able to do that. And that total pool is always going to be relatively small, just due to the fact that there's economic incentives at play, and those economic incentives require there to be a relatively high upfront cost here. Anyway, I'm going to leave that one at that for today. Moving on. So Honey Abu shared this new website that actually was shared in the Daily Gwei Discord channel by TGK here. It's a website that covers Ethereum's roadmap. Now, you can click into each of these sections here: the merge, the surge, the scourge, all of them, and it'll basically break down each of the roadmap items and if they've been completed or not, and like more information about them. So essentially you can see here that if you click on like something like single slot finality, which is in ongoing research, it tells you a summary of it, and it gives you a couple of resources to go research more about it. So this is a really, really great website. I think the only feedback I have is this background image definitely gets in the way of things, like the ETH logo. Maybe just have the background like black or something, or reduce the opacity of the reduce the kind of brightness or opacity, whatever you call it, of the logo in the background there. But the actual information is really, really great. So yeah, you should definitely bookmark this. It's at ethroadmap.com. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to check out. But it has, as I said, a lot of information about Ethereum's roadmap. It even has timelines on Denkun and Petra. I mean, these are estimates, obviously, the timelines here on these things. And then it has links to like key organizations, the client teams, other teams, and more information here. So really, really great to see this. And big shout out to TGK for developing this. And thanks to Honey Abu for sharing this on Twitter. It's great to see that something like this exists. Speaking of Ethereum resources, the Ethereum.org quarterly roadmap has been published. So this is the roadmap for Q1 2024, everything that they're going to be focusing on in 2024, they being the Ethereum.org team. You can go check this out and get involved if you want. As I've said before, Ethereum.org is completely open source, which means that you can get involved directly. You don't have to be part of the main team or anything like that. You can just get involved as a contributor if you would like to. So yeah, you can go check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below, but a lot of great updates here, a lot of great roadmap items here, and very excited to see all of this be executed on during Q1 and maybe into Q2 as well. All right, so I want to talk a bit about layer 2s. I think for the rest of the episode is pretty much going to be mainly about layer 2s. But first off, I came across this, basically this meme here, which I thought was really cool, where pipe.eth shared this and basically has a picture of, what's his name? One of the original Spider-Man in the Sony movies, having his glasses off, and then he's seeing all these logos on the right-hand side. He's got the ETH logo there. It's got the OP logo, Mutable logo, Starknet logo, basically everything got to do with L2s, and then Peter Parker puts the glasses on and you can see just all ETH logos, right? And there's obviously Bitcoin there as well. Now, the purpose of this meme is to basically say that it's all Ethereum, right? When it comes to L2s, they are Ethereum. And anyone who tells you otherwise is being disingenuous because, yes, some of these things are centralized, right? I mean, most of them are centralized. They have training wheels on them. None of the actual ones that have any traction are at stage 2 yet, right? But they will be in the future, but they aren't yet. And they have different constructions as well. But still, they are Ethereum. This is how Ethereum is scaling. You guys know Ethereum has a roll-up-centric roadmap. It's how Ethereum is scaling. So to say that these layer 2s aren't Ethereum, or to ignore these layer 2s to begin with, is to be disingenuous. And I actually see leaders from other ecosystems completely ignoring layer 2s when talking about metrics such as DeFi volume traded. Like I saw one just today. I was like, this is crazy. I was going to comment and I'm like, you know what? I don't want to get involved with these fights anymore. Like it's so tiring. But I saw that and it's like, okay, well, you're only comparing this chain to your chain, your favorite chain, whatever it is, to Ethereum layer 1. You should be comparing it to layer 2s and Ethereum layer 1, like together, because layer 2s is how Ethereum is scaling. Like if we were scaling Ethereum at layer 1, then for sure, compare it just to layer 1, but that's not how Ethereum is scaling. And these people know this, right? They're not oblivious to this, but they're just being disingenuous and they would rather spread this false information, essentially, or at least misleading information, essentially, that these other chains are doing more volume or looking better metric-wise than Ethereum, or that Ethereum is stagnating, while ignoring the fact that there's been explosive growth across these layer 2s, and there continues to be more and more growth. I mean, we're really only at the starting point of these layer 2s, right? Whether they be roll-ups or validiums or what have you, really just at the starting point here. So it is really crazy to me that people will omit this information or just ignore it when it should be included here. And I really do wish a lot of these metric tracking websites would have an option to basically have it so that you basically have Ethereum and then you can kind of like expand Ethereum out and it will have all the L2s there, so it aggregates all of the metrics together. Like something like DeFi Llama should do this, in my opinion, where essentially the DeFi trading volume, fee revenue, so on and so forth, should all be aggregated under the Ethereum umbrella, and then you can expand it and see which of the L2 chains, see the individual L2 chains metrics. I think that would be a good way to display this data. So maybe that happens eventually, but yeah, anyway, it's all Ethereum, guys. It's definitely all Ethereum here. Now, keeping on the layer 2 topic here, I came across a great tweet from Ryan Berkmans over the weekend where he said, one of the most bullish things that I've seen recently is the rise of major L2s partnering with each other to deploy their L3s on each other's L2s. Starknet settled on OP, etc. These relationships will motivate new cross L2 tech and dependencies, web of chains rooted on Ethereum. So, obviously, there's been a bit of, I guess, like poking fun at or FUD spread around the term L3 on Twitter. And I think I warned about this like at least a year ago, that I said that the L3 term is just going to be so easy to make fun of. But regardless of that, when it comes to the actual technology, this is the bull case, basically, where all of these chains, whether they be L2s, L3s, or even L4s, whatever that is, all settling onto each other, all sharing kind of tech with each other, all being interoperable with each other, and depending on each other, and creating this kind of symbiotic relationship, is extremely bullish for the rollup-centric roadmap because, as Ryan says here, it's rooted all on Ethereum. Like, it all settles down to Ethereum. So essentially, we have Ethereum as this ultra-secure, reliable settlement layer, and then we have all of these other chains building on top of it, inheriting that when constructed correctly, obviously. Hopefully, most of them make it to stage 2 in the foreseeable future or in the near future. Right, and then they're all just basically rooting onto Ethereum, rooted on Ethereum as that settlement layer there, and they have their own settlement layer as well. Because realistically, if you settle an L3 onto an L2, as I've described before, the L3 is reliant on the L2, and then the L2 obviously is reliant on L1. Whereas if the L2 goes offline, then the L3s go offline, right? So the L3 is indifferent to L1 because it needs the L2 to survive. But this is just like a tech implementation thing, or this is just like a technical concern, right? This is not really concerned and a settlement concern or settlement guarantee concern for these things. But typically L3s are going to be things that don't require, like, in my opinion, like super high security or anything like that. They're going to be things that may not even be blockchains. They may just be things that kind of resemble just microservices, stuff like that, right, that you see in Web 2. So there's still a kind of world of experimentation to happen here. But the most bullish thing is that they are able to settle on each other. There's a lot of shared stuff going on here that creates a symbiotic relationship, and then it's all rooted on Ethereum, which means that it all flows back to Ethereum and just strengthens the entire Ethereum ecosystem and basically makes the meme that I just showed you guys, more true each and every day. So just a really great tweet here from Ryan. So kudos to him for putting that out. Now, speaking of metrics for tracking L2 usage, growthepie.xyz has added a new metric, I think, or have highlighted one of their recent metrics here, which is a Sankey diagram of the layer 2 activity as measured by total fees paid by chain and category in the last 30 days. So in the GIF, you can actually see this happening. You can see on the left-hand side what the L2 is, in the middle what the actual category is, so whether it's DeFi or otherwise, and then basically seeing on the right-hand side here the expanded category or the subcategory essentially. And there is links to this. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to see them. I think I can open them up here and hopefully it'll just load for me so I can show you guys more in depth of what this looks like. So you can see, just for example, on the left hand side, you've got Arbitrum, and then you highlight Arbitrum, and then you can see there is $4.3 million of fees paid in the last 30 days. Okay, that's to Ethereum. That's the total fees paid on Arbitrum, not just to Ethereum, but just like what Arbitrum took in generally. And then you can see where these went to. Obviously, DeFi dominates here in purple. Then if you highlight DeFi, you can then see what the majority of the DeFi kind of volumes went to. And it went to like lending, staking, and you have derivative exchange and decentralized exchange. And then you can play around with this yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But just great to see another metric here from Grow the Pie in order to keep track of what's happening on Ethereum layer 2s. All right, last up on the layer 2 topic, just wanted to mention a tweet that I put out over the weekend where I said a lot of layer 2s on Ethereum will end up like the long list of layer 1s, failed experiments that gained little to no traction. Just because something is an L2 does not guarantee any sort of success, and a lot of the L2s launching lately are just jumping on a bandwagon. Now, I've talked about this on the Refuel plenty of times before, but I just wanted to reiterate this fact that an L2 is like any other thing that gets built in crypto. It's going to succeed or die based on if it finds product market fit or not. And, Kevin Owocki here from Gitcoin basically replied to me and said, RIP the public goods network. And I replied to him saying, the Gitcoin guys did it right with public goods network by ending the experiment once it was clear product market fit was not found. Too many projects just exist as zombies in this industry. And if you actually go and look at the list of the layer 1s that are still around as zombies today, and these layer 1s are really old, guys. Like, I'm talking 2017 and earlier sort of thing, but they're still around and they're still acting like they're relevant because they just want to exist as a zombie, because there is still some economic worth to their token, right? They're still got like a market cap in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. They still want to keep it relevant so that maybe when the bull market comes around, the token price goes up and they can sell whatever bags they're holding on to, right? But realistically, these things are zombie projects. They're not going anywhere. They died a long time ago, but yeah, there's those incentives at play, the monetary incentives. The same is going to be true for layer 2s. There's going to be layer 2s that exist for a long time that are going absolutely nowhere. And the thing is that keeping a layer 2 alive is less expensive than keeping a layer 1 alive, because with a layer 2, the expense is really just like the data expense and the proof expense, whereas with a layer 1, the expense is paying out the issuance to the validators to secure the network, basically, or to keep the network running. So the layer twos, some of them will exist as zombies for a very long time, and I'm going to be curious to see which ones do exist like that. But in saying that, there are obviously a lot of successful L2s already. I mean, Arbitrum 1, I think, to date is the most successful L2, but the other ones aren't far behind, and there's more and more of these that are kind of coming online that will be a success. But at the same time, there'll be plenty of them that will just fail. A lot of them will probably fail ungracefully, where they'll exist as zombies or they'll refuse to admit that they failed. Some of them will basically shut down gracefully, like the Public Goods Network. And again, a huge kudos to the Gitcoin team for doing that. But yeah, as I said, just because something's an L2 does not guarantee any sort of success. It's the same as any other product within this ecosystem. It needs to find product market fit, or else it'll just exist either as a zombie or it'll just fade away and get shut down. But anyway, enough on that topic. Just the last thing I wanted to mention here was that there was a record daily active users on Farcaster yesterday. So on Saturday, not yesterday as in Sunday, on Saturday, first time above 10,000. So this data is coming from Dan Romero, the founder of Farcaster. So it is definitely very, very reliable here. But why I wanted to mention this is because I think Farcaster, out of all of the non-speculative crypto apps, and I'm talking like pure non-speculative crypto apps, I think Farcaster is the one that is currently on top by a country mile, to be honest. Because if you think about why Farcaster is non-speculative, someone mentioned in the Daily Gwei Discord channel that is there people airdrop farming it. I'm like, people are airdrop farming everything. It doesn't matter if it's speculative or not. They're airdrop farming everything. So I think that there are obviously some people farming any potential kind of token that Farcaster might do in the future. But at the same time, I go on Farcaster, and I mean, I haven't been on over the last couple of months, but I went on today. There is so much organic activity happening on there now. There are so many interesting conversations happening. I was just scrolling through today, looking through it all, seeing all the conversations happening and being like, wow, this is genuine activity. This isn't just people airdrop farming, right? This is genuine activity. This isn't just people being degens. This is genuine non-speculative activity. And I love seeing this because you guys know what I'm all about in this industry is sustainability. I am very, very excited about seeing anything that can be sustainable outside of any kind of like token incentives or any kind of speculation, because speculation's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it is not generally sustainable, right? I actually liken a lot of the speculation to something like a company town, right? The company town, for those of you who don't know, is the concept of a town that literally just gets built around a company that is doing something in the area. So a lot of them are built around like mining facilities, for example, like they're called mining towns, right? A lot of them were built around like oil fields, right? And then once the resource is depleted, those towns basically cease to exist, right? So the same is true for a lot of the speculative activity that happens, whether they be meme coins or this kind of some incentives or there's some farming going on here. Once the incentives run out, once the speculation runs out, the people leave, basically. So it's the same kind of concept here, if we're using the analogy of a company town. And that's not sustainable, right? That is very unsustainable, and that does not lead itself to a sustainable ecosystem. So if you are trying to create a sustainable ecosystem, then you don't want these people there. You don't want to optimize just for that short-term gain. You want to optimize for the long-term gain. And then from there, hopefully get that non-speculative users there. And then maybe later on the speculative stuff come. But by that point, you have a good base to work off of. So yeah, congrats to Farcaster for this. I know I've said this a bunch of times, but I'm really trying to spend more time on Farcaster. It's just hard because I've actually tried to spend less time on Twitter, on just social media generally. I've actually tried to spend less time on my computer generally because I just spend so much time on it. And Twitter, like... you guys know my opinion on Twitter. It can be so toxic and there's just so much crap on there. I'm only doing it these days, honestly, to keep up with the refuel and to get content for the refuel. But I was really, really impressed by the quality of conversations that I saw on Farcaster today. And I'm using the Warp class client. So yeah, I'm going to try and make a concerted effort to be on there a bit more. But I think on that note, that's going to be it for today's episode. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.